The hospital corridor stretched endlessly ahead, fluorescent lights flickering like dying stars against the sterile white walls. Dr. Sarah Chen's footsteps echoed with an almost supernatural resonance as she approached room 237, the patient file trembling in her hands. 3 weeks had passed since Dr. Marcus Holloway vanished without a trace, leaving behind only cryptic notes and a patient who claimed to know exactly where he'd gone. The patient in room 237 had been catatonic for months, yet somehow, impossibly, he'd whispered Marcus's name the night of the disappearance. Sarah's pulse quickened as she reached for the door handle, her reflection in the window glass appearing distorted, almost unrecognizable. The patient's eyes were open when she entered, staring directly at her with an intensity that sent ice through her veins. "You're not the first doctor to come looking for him," the patient said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "But you might be the last." What had Marcus discovered in this room that made him disappear? And why did Sarah feel like she was walking into a trap she'd set for herself? Dr. Sarah Chen had always prided herself on her rationality, her ability to separate emotion from diagnosis. But standing in room 237, facing a patient who shouldn't be able to speak, she felt her carefully constructed world beginning to crack. The patient, identified only as John Doe, had been admitted 6 months ago after severe head trauma. His medical record showed extensive brain damage that should have left him permanently vegetative. Yet here he was, not only conscious, but seemingly aware of events that had occurred while he was supposedly unconscious. His eyes held a clarity that unnerved her, as if he could see through her professional facade to the doubts and fears she kept hidden. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled up a chair, the metal legs scraping against the floor with a sound that made her wince. The psychological thriller unfolding before her challenged everything she thought she knew about medicine, about consciousness, about the very nature of reality itself. Dr. Holloway was asking the wrong questions, John Doe continued, his voice carrying an odd cadence that seemed to echo from somewhere deeper than his throat. He wanted to know how I could remember things that happened while I was unconscious. But the real question is, what if I was never unconscious at all? Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she processed his words. The medical impossibility of his statement warred with the undeniable evidence before her. She pulled out her tablet, scrolling through Marcus's notes from his final weeks. The entries grew increasingly erratic, filled with references to consciousness transfer and neural persistence beyond clinical death. Her colleague had been investigating something that had clearly consumed him, driving him to work longer hours and speak in whispers about breakthrough discoveries. The twisted story was becoming clearer, yet more terrifying with each revelation. Sarah realized she was following the exact same path that had led to Marcus's disappearance, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. The patient's room felt smaller now, as if the walls were closing in around them. She noticed details that seemed wrong, the way the shadows fell despite the overhead lighting, the slight delay in John Doe's blink reflex, the temperature that seemed to drop whenever he spoke. "Marcus discovered something about me," the patient said, his lips barely moving. Something that made him question everything he believed about life and death. Sarah's rational mind screamed warnings, but her curiosity proved stronger. She found herself leaning forward, drawn into his orbit like a moth to flame. The dark secrets hidden in this room seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and she understood why Marcus had become obsessed. This wasn't just a medical mystery. It was something that challenged the fundamental nature of human existence. The psychological conflict between her scientific training and the supernatural implications of what she was witnessing left her unmoored, as if she were losing her grip on reality itself. As John Doe began to reveal what he'd told Marcus, Sarah's understanding of the situation shifted dramatically. The patient claimed to remember not just the events of the past 6 months, but memories that seemed to belong to other people, patients who had died in this very room over the past decade. His descriptions were too detailed, too specific to be delusions or lucky guesses. He spoke of private conversations between doctors, of family secrets whispered by dying patients, of the exact moment when each person's consciousness had flickered out. "This room," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, "has been collecting us all." Sarah felt her professional skepticism crumbling as she realized the implications. If John Doe was somehow accessing the memories of the deceased, then everything she understood about consciousness, about death itself, was wrong. The mind-bending story he was telling suggested that some part of human awareness could persist beyond clinical death, gathering in places touched by repeated trauma and loss. The unreliable narrator she had initially dismissed was proving to be the most reliable source of truth she'd ever encountered.
The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't disappeared. He'd been absorbed. His consciousness somehow merged with the collective that existed within these walls. John Doe's eyes seemed to flicker with recognition that wasn't his own, and Sarah realized she was looking at what remained of her missing colleague. "He's still here," the patient said, and for a moment his voice carried Marcus's distinctive inflection. "We're all still here." The psychological thriller had become a supernatural horror, and Sarah found herself questioning her own sanity. Was she experiencing a breakdown, or was she witnessing something that science couldn't yet explain? The emotional weight of potentially losing Marcus forever warred with the terrifying possibility that death might not be the end she'd always believed it to be. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone, torn between calling for help and documenting everything she was experiencing. The dark secrets of room 237 were revealing themselves, but each answer only raised more disturbing questions. Sarah's world tilted on its axis as she processed the full implications of what she was hearing. The patient, no, the collective consciousness that spoke through him, began to share Marcus's final moments. Her colleague had discovered that certain locations could somehow trap human consciousness after death, creating a kind of supernatural recording device. The more traumatic the deaths, the stronger the imprint became. Room 237 had been the site of dozens of deaths over the years, each one adding to the growing collection of trapped souls. Marcus had been so fascinated by his discovery that he'd begun experimenting, trying to communicate with the consciousness that resided there. But the plot twist Sarah hadn't expected was that the collective was actively trying to add to their numbers. They were lonely, desperate for new voices to join their eternal conversation. Marcus hadn't been murdered or kidnapped. He'd been seduced by the promise of answers to questions about life after death, questions that had consumed him until he'd willingly joined them. The moral dilemma facing Sarah became clear as John Doe's, or rather the collective's, true purpose was revealed. They weren't malevolent entities seeking to harm the living. They were desperate, lonely souls who had found a way to persist beyond death, but at a terrible cost. They could observe the world of the living but never truly interact with it. Their existence was a kind of purgatory, watching life continue around them while being unable to participate. Marcus thought he could help us, the voice that might have been John Doe said, though Sarah was no longer certain of anything. He thought he could find a way to set us free, but the only freedom we found is in growing our numbers. Sarah felt the weight of an impossible choice settling on her shoulders. She could document everything and risk being dismissed as having suffered a psychological break, or she could join Marcus in his research and risk losing herself to the same obsession that had claimed him. The mystery unraveling before her was bigger than any medical discovery. It was a fundamental challenge to human understanding of consciousness and death. The room began to feel different as Sarah wrestled with her decision. The fluorescent lights seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat, and she could swear she heard whispers emanating from the walls themselves. The collective was growing impatient, their need for new consciousness becoming more urgent. Sarah realized that her emotional investment in finding Marcus had led her into the same trap that had claimed him. The psychological thriller she'd stumbled into was revealing its final twist. She wasn't just investigating the disappearance of a colleague, she was being recruited to join him. The voices in the room grew stronger, more insistent, and Sarah understood that she was running out of time to make her choice. Her scientific curiosity warred with her survival instincts, and she found herself questioning whether the knowledge she'd gained was worth the price she might have to pay. The dark secrets of Room 237 were demanding a sacrifice, and Sarah was the intended offering. As the truth reached its crescendo, Sarah made her choice. She backed toward the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. The collective's voice rose in desperation, pleading with her to stay, to join them in their eternal existence. But Sarah had seen enough. She understood now that some mysteries were meant to remain unsolved. Some doors were meant to stay closed. The twisted story of Room 237 would die with her silence, but that was a price she was willing to pay for her freedom. As she fled the room, she heard John Doe's voice calling after her, but it was Marcus's words that followed her down the corridor. "You can't escape what you know, Sarah. The knowledge will consume you, just like it consumed me." The psychological thriller had reached its conclusion, but Sarah realized that her real story was just beginning. She would have to live with the knowledge of what existed in Room 237 and the certainty that someday, inevitably, it would call her back. The tale of Dr. Sarah Chan and the missing physician leaves us with more questions than answers, doesn't it? The psychological thriller that unfolded in Room 237 challenges our understanding of consciousness, death, and the very nature of reality itself. Did Sarah make the right choice by walking away, or did her silence condemn the trapped souls to eternal longing? The mind-bending story raises profound questions about what we're willing to sacrifice for knowledge and whether some mysteries are too dangerous to unravel. What do you think really happened in that room? Was the collective consciousness real, or was Sarah experiencing a psychological break brought on by her desperate search for Marcus? Share your theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear your interpretation of this twisted story. If this tale of dark secrets and unreliable narrators left you haunted and hungry for more, hit that like button and subscribe for more psychological thrillers that will keep you questioning reality long after the video ends. Until next time, stay kind, stay sharp, and stay curious.